Scrum team roles. So the first one is the Scrum team itself. So what I've highlighted at the beginning here is just to make sure that you understand that the Scrum team actually consists of the product owner, the development team, and the Scrum master. So despite the fact that the development team is a team, it is within the Scrum team. And that's important because a lot of times in the video that I've put together and in the Scrum guide, the teams are mentioned. But it's really important to remember the distinction between the Scrum team and the development team. And this is one of the things that comes up in the exam, in the certification exam. And it's also in industry, you need to really remember. So the Scrum team is the combination of the product owner, the development team, and the Scrum master. And there are certain things that the Scrum master needs to do to help to facilitate the whole Scrum team. But then the development team, so the people that are responsible for building the shippable increment of a product or for building a piece of the product, have their own needs and obviously have specific impediments that come up during the course of a project that the Scrum Master will work with them to solve. So I'm just highlighting the difference between the two teams there. Next, drawing attention to the fact that this model, so the fact that there is a development team and they are part of the wider Scrum team, and the fact that there are explicitly just three roles, is specifically designed to optimize flexibility, creativity, and productivity. So in other words, there's a reason why the team has been designed this way. It's been designed without stakeholders. It's been designed without other members of the organization. But it has been designed with the key people necessary to deliver a working increment of a product and to collaborate, really, in order to do that. The next part is highlighting the fact that incremental deliveries of done product ensure a potentially useful version of working product is always available. So what's meant here is that the very nature of Scrum lends itself to the fact that a piece of a working product is delivered each sprint. And what this is saying is that the fact that the piece of the product is done, according to the team's definition, is really key here, guys. It's a really key thing within Scrum to make sure that your definition of done is sufficient, that you're satisfied as a Scrum team that the output of each sprint is going to be a useful version of a working product. So really work, as I drew attention to in one of the earlier parts, really work on this definition of done to make sure it incorporates essentially the rules that you're going to live by as a team, to make sure that whatever you come up with at the end of the sprint, as long as it adheres to your rules, as I said before, the testers have said that it's tested, might be one of the things in the definition of done. The designers are happy that it meets all of their design standards, might be another rule and definition of done. And basically putting together this list of things that you will adhere to and working and adapting that list as time goes on is really key. So that's why I want to draw your attention to that. The product owner is responsible for maximizing the value of the product and the work of the development team. So this is one of the things that I know came up in one of the exams that I sat. So I just thought I'd draw attention to the definition here. I'm really drawing attention to definitions of things here so that you can see in the Scrum guide the way it's defined, because a lot of times the questions that come up in the exam are likely to be based around what a product owner is responsible for and isn't responsible for, or accountable for. So if you're responsible for something, it means that you actually are the doer. You actually are the person that does the work that somebody's going to come to and say, you've done it and why wasn't it done correctly? However, in terms of being accountable, it may be that someone else does the work, but you are someone who either instructs them or has delegated that task, but you are still accountable, as in someone could still come to you to ask you the situation or why something wasn't done. So that's something to look out for in terms of exams. The product owner is the sole person responsible for managing the product backlog. So there's that word responsible. So a lot of times in industry, I've seen situations where the product owner hasn't taken responsibility or doesn't realize that they are the only person responsible for managing the product backlog. And sometimes the Scrum Master has to get involved here just to coach them to understand that. So I've highlighted that. Ordering the items in the product backlog to best achieve goals and missions is one of the things that managing the backlog includes, and therefore the product owner is responsible for. And optimizing the value of the work the development team performs is another one of those things. So the product owner is consistently thinking about what are the best things that the development team could work on to get the most value out of them. This is something they consistently think of. So I just thought I'd highlight these two because I know they come up in past exams, and they're examples of the kind of things that come up in the exam. I mean, potentially anything could come up in the exam, but I'm highlighting examples so that you can see the kind of questions that could be asked. For the product owner to succeed, the entire organization must respect his or her decisions. I've highlighted that because a lot of times one of the key challenges, and if you're a Scrum Master, I'd ask you to pay really close attention to this one. A lot of times the difficulty we have is in the real world. If I'm really honest, a lot of the time the product owner's line manager or the product owner's seniors often do not respect the product owner's decisions, or they do respect the product owner's decisions, but because of their status, they actually have a right to overrule the product owner. So it's just something to be aware of, is that in the reality of life, sometimes, because of the nature of an organization, it is difficult. And I really sympathize with product owners, you product owners out there. It's difficult to perform your role. So this is something to be aware of in everyday life. And, there are various techniques for dealing with that. Some of them revolve around making your senior stakeholders aware of how you can actually add value for them, and you can take into account the whole organization, still prioritizing them when necessary and still bearing in mind their opinion, but how you can add value for them by doing your role and by them allowing you to do your role, how you can use a lot of the information you get from the team to make the right decisions. The development team. So the development team consists of professionals who do the work of delivering a potentially realisable increment. So what I'm drawing attention to here is really just the definition of what the development team does. And again, to the fact that the done increment, that is really key. As you see it mentioned so many times here. The fact that it's done is where the power is in Scrum, because at the end of a sprint, you have some certainty that you've accomplished something that is really of value to your users and to the business. So Scrum recognizes no titles for development team members other than developer. Regardless of the work being performed by the person, there are no exceptions to this rule. I thought I'd highlight that because, first of all, because I wanted to draw attention to what Ted was saying in the video, which is that there are 3 roles in Scrum, and one of them is the development team. So it doesn't matter whether you've got designers, developers. I mean, designers, even though they are called designers, are helping to develop an increment of the product and hence develop the product. So I've highlighted this just to really drive home the fact that we're one team. As a Scrum Master, a product owner, and a development team, we are one team. And within the development team, everybody's one team. So the designers, the testers, and the developers, etc. Whatever industry you're in, it doesn't have to be software, but if people are working together to deliver a product, they need to be one team within Scrum, and that's where part of the value and the power is in delivery, and the transparency between those team members is going to make that product stronger and going to assure you delivery that you can be confident in, that has value. The Scrum Master. So here I am drawing attention to some of the things that the Scrum Master is responsible for. The first one is just the definition, which you can pick up from the video anyway, but just ensuring that Scrum is understood and enacted. I've seen in the open assessment, the scrum.org open assessment, which is the practice exam that is going to give you a lot of confidence, which I'll talk about later for any certification. I've seen some questions around this, some tricky little questions really, in terms of meetings and things that a Scrum Master does or doesn't need to attend. So a lot of times in Scrum you'll find that the Scrum Master is there to facilitate and to make sure that Scrum is understood and enacted. But sometimes the Scrum Master does not need to be present with the team in order to make sure that happens. He or she may need to just set up a meeting, or he or she may need to be present, and a lot of times I recommend you are present in nearly every situation. But there are also some situations where you don't need to be present. Scrum Masters do this by ensuring that the team adheres to Scrum theory, practices and rules. So that's why I'm going through this guide, just to make sure that you really understand the rules, especially if you're a Scrum Master, just if you're a Scrum Master. And the Scrum Master is a servant leader for the Scrum team. Servant leadership is a really important concept. The idea is that by serving the team, you lead the team. If you can think about the times you've had a manager who's really helped you to get to the next level, or has really answered questions for you, I'm sure this will make a lot of sense. By really helping a team to succeed, you are helping them to get to the next level, but you're still a leader. It doesn't stop you being a leader. There's no weakness in this term here. As you can see, the leader part is there, and it is really, even though the Scrum Master is leading through example, through influence, through making the whole Scrum team aware of the Scrum framework rules, there is a strong sense of leadership there. Facilitating events as required or needed. So this is something that Scrum Master does, and I don't really need to go into detail about that, but the word facilitating or facilitator often comes up in Scrum. Removing impediments, that's the key thing that Scrum Master does, so removing any of the blockers, making sure the team can work effectively. Leading and coaching the organisation in Scrum adoption. So I've highlighted that one because one thing that often gets missed, I think, is the fact that a Scrum Master actually has the authority to coach anyone in the organisation and to lead. So those are two very important things within an organisation, and a Scrum Master should really be respected for that, and be respected enough and empowered enough to go into an organisation and be the authority on Scrum, and to be able to say, listen, you need to give the team space, or you need to... I've had situations where I've had a really good relationship with senior stakeholders, and had to say, listen, if you've got questions, direct them through this person. And sometimes it would be me, or sometimes it would be through a product owner. Now, we don't want to stop stakeholders collaborating with the team, but when questions become excessive, that's an example of where you need to coach people in the organisation to understand that after a certain point, you're actually reducing the productivity of the team. Okay, so that ends this section. I hope it's been helpful for you. Thank you for your time, and I will speak to you in the next section.